Savannah, as described by her ex-boyfriend, the man who put her in the horrible mess she found herself, was a beautiful soul, an excellent mother and girlfriend. She was just 23 years old when her life completely changed in a most dramatic way. She lost 20 years of her life to a moment of indiscretion. Truly, the power of walking away and cutting someone off completely is the best solution for a toxic situation. Don't do phone calls, no text messages, no social media. Just live in your peace. But no! She stayed in it and paid a huge price. This is the story of Savannah Grant and Sabrina Greenlee. You see, until you're in that horrible situation where you are threatened, even assaulted, especially by uninvited and unwelcome verbal or physical conduct, and you have exhausted all options, you won't understand why Savannah took that foolish decision that landed her in jail and caused her son to resent her. Savannah had many chances to work away from her 5 years toxic relationship where she felt unsupported, demeaned, attacked and assaulted. Alas! She chose to stay. He not only cheated on her, he betrayed her in a very horrible way. Welcome to my channel. This story of everyday people like you and I who made avoidable mistakes in their marriage will make you realize that marrying a godly and God-fearing person is the surest way to happily ever after. If this is the sort of stories you like, subscribe to my channel so you can get a notification whenever I upload a new video. Let's get right down to it. Savannah didn't make the right choices in the dating game. She lived a fast life and dated older guys who were mostly drug dealers, but none of them was physically abusive to her. Instead, they were nice. They respected and treated her well. They took care of her and her family. They never put her in any compromising situations. She was used to being treated like a lady by her drug-dealing boyfriends. They took great care of her. She went on dates with them and they never allowed any female to disrespect her. In spite of their kindness to her, she was never in love with any of them she dated, and she dated many of them at the time. She cared about them, no doubt, but she treated them the way they treated her. She was the oldest of 3 kids, and she basically put her life on hold to play the mother hen. Eventually, she got tired of living that reckless life and dating bad guys. Even though she was reckless, she always loved to go to church. At a time in her life, when she was 19 years old, she got the custody of her 14-year-old sister because their mother passed away and her father was addicted to drugs. Savannah moved to Florida and cut off the relationships. She moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where her friend lived, and that was where she met another girl who invited her to church. They got really close. She was in her house for dinner one Sunday and answered the phone. It was Anton, her brother, that called in from a Philadelphia jail where he was serving a life sentence for murder. They started having phone conversations and writing. It got really personal and they fell for each other over mail and phone calls. She eventually moved in with her friend and her mother. She was always taking care of her little sister, so her friend suggested she stayed with the family for a while and just rest, and that was what she did. While she was living in with her friend and mother, who was also very good to her, they taught Savannah a lot about prayer and God. His mother was a very prayerful woman and they knew he was coming home in no time, but just didn't know when. She got a job and a house, and shortly after she moved out of her friend's house. She continued to communicate with Anton. She visited him at the federal penitentiary with his mother from time to time. Savannah didn't date anyone else. She poured herself into her job, taking care of her sister, and going to church. Unfortunately, her sister became pregnant and she had no idea because she was always working. She thought her sister was always busy with basketball practices. She didn't know she was also engaging with guys and adult activities. Savannah took her sister's pregnancy hard because she felt she wasn't ready to be a mother at 15. Savannah met a male colleague at work who tried to hook up with her. She went out with the guy from work one night and they were intimate. Savannah became embarrassed more than anything because that was not her idea of how she thought it would be. She wanted it to be with somebody that she cared about and loved. Before this time, she hadn't been intimate with any man for 18 months. She didn't know she pregnant until she was already 5 months gone but didn't tell the father. It was just once, and that one night stand resulted in a pregnancy. She didn't know she was pregnant because her stomach was flat and she had no pregnancy symptoms. The pregnancy put her in a very big state of depression because then she was 20 and raising her 15-year-old sister. She decided to remove the pregnancy but later decided against it. Since she wasn't in a relationship with the guy who put her in the family way, she cut him off. She told Anton when he called her one day that she was pregnant. He wasn't happy about it because he felt she belonged to him and shouldn't have been pregnant by another man. Even though Savannah was a church girl, she engaged in spiritually inappropriate activities. She went around doing whatever she thought she could get by with and became a slave to her whims. Perhaps she didn't read it in her Bible that engaging in fornication is a direct disobedience to God's commandment. If you want to be a believer that seeks God in righteousness and holiness. If you don't want to be a committed believer, then don't behave in such a manner that discredits the name of God. It's dangerous to be neither cold nor warm. Eventually, Anton's case was overturned soon after and he was released from prison. He did 8 years of the life sentence. He got home the very day Savannah delivered her son, Caleb. It was confusion and chaos from that day. Anton didn't want her to have any relationship with the father of her baby at all and made her believe she would be his only woman and no one else. However, from the moment he got home it was just crazy and chaotic, and it was completely different from the relationship she envisioned in her mind. It was always something. She always argued and fought with different females because he always had different women. This was a lifestyle Savannah didn't know. She allowed him to visit her house, but he began to disrespect even more her when different women began to drop him off and pick him up at her house. They would call at all times of the night and it was just crazy, and the level of disrespect was unbearable. She got sick of the chaotic lifestyle but could not get rid of him. Whenever she tried to end the relationship he would come back and she would always let him back into her life because she had a kind of connection with Anton that she never felt all those years she dated her older drug dealer boyfriends. She was in love with him, but Anton was a far cry from the life she knew. The reason she chose to stay was because of the intimate gratification she enjoyed with him despite having her share of guys. Other than that, he had nothing else to offer. Absolutely nothing. The relationship was just toxic, yet she continued in it headlong. See, an African proverb says, whatever food you don't have appetite for, don't smell it. You just might find yourself nibbling on it. Savannah continued to allow him to treat her in a manner that she had never allowed anyone to treat her before, and when she tried to get out of the relationship she couldn't. She would always let him come back into her life, and so she told her sister she was leaving because she didn't want to struggle anymore, so she moved to Maryland where her son's godmothers lived. Even though Savannah moved to Maryland, Anton was still very much in my life. He never stopped communicating with her. One of her friends gave him her phone number, and so he always had a way of finding her anyway because they were connected with each other's families and friends, so he always knew how to find her. She saw him a couple of times and it was still women issue. Anton also dated another lady, Sabrina, who he met at a strip club at the same time he was dating Savannah. She knew who she was, but Savannah never knew who she was until she moved back from Maryland. He moved in with her. Caleb, Savannah's son, had a respiratory virus infection that caused mild, cold-like symptoms. Since he was just a child, he was in the hospital all the time. His father convinced her to move back to South Carolina. She had no premonition that move would be the greatest regret of her life. Caleb's father was no help. He really truly didn't become a father to him. She didn't force him to take responsibility either and took care of the boy alone. She just had to align herself with the kind of people who will help propel her forward in the right direction, especially when she had no support and had to grow up quickly to take on the role of a mother to her sister, but her flippant choice of men was bound to lead her in the wrong direction. When she moved back to South Carolina, they continued dating. She had some encounters with some other females like she did before she moved to Maryland. There were fights with them and confrontations. They always knew about Savannah, but she didn't know about them until they called her house, probably for her to know about them. The reason she chose to stay was because of the intimate gratification she enjoyed with him despite having her share of guys. Other than that, he had nothing else to offer. Absolutely nothing. The relationship was just toxic, yet she continued in it headlong. See, an African proverb says, whatever food you don't have appetite for, don't smell it. You just might find yourself nibbling on it. Savannah continued to allow him to treat her in a manner that she had never allowed anyone to treat her before, and when she tried to get out of the relationship she couldn't. She would always let him come back into her life, and so she told her sister she was leaving because she didn't want to struggle anymore, so she moved to Maryland where her son's godmothers lived. Even though Savannah moved to Maryland, Anton was still very much in my life. He never stopped communicating with her. One of her friends gave him her phone number, and so he always had a way of finding her anyway because they were connected with each other's families and friends, so he always knew how to find her. She saw him a couple of times, and it was still women issue. Anton also dated another lady, Sabrina, who he met at a strip club at the same time he was dating Savannah. She knew who she was, but Savannah never knew who she was until she moved back from Maryland. He moved in with her. Caleb, Savannah's son, had a respiratory virus infection that caused mild, cold-like symptoms. Since he was just a child, he was in the hospital all the time. His father convinced her to move back to South Carolina. She had no premonition that move would be the greatest regret of her life. Caleb's father was no help. He really truly didn't become a father to him. She didn't force him to take responsibility either and took care of the boy alone. She just had to align herself with the kind of people who will help propel her forward in the right direction, especially when she had no support and had to grow up quickly to take on the role of a mother to her sister, but her flippant choice of men was bound to lead her in the wrong direction. When she moved back to South Carolina, they continued dating. She had some encounters with some other females like she did before she moved to Maryland. There were fights with them and confrontations. They always knew about Savannah, but she didn't know about them until they called her house, probably for her to know about them. Anton had another girlfriend, Sabrina, who he started dating after she moved to Maryland. Sabrina and her friends confronted Savannah and had physical fights with her. She had an altercation with another lady she knew who had been calling her house and hanging up all night long. She was a younger girl who went to the same high school as Savannah's younger sister. Savannah's sister didn't like Anton, so she always told her sister about his promiscuous lifestyle. Anton, as a 25-year-old, even went to the prom night with the high school girl who was obviously in love with him. She called Savannah's house many times. She asked why she kept calling and hanging up all night. Her baby was at home and it was irritating. Savannah went looking for him at his complex, not knowing that this young girl would be there. So she got to the house and she was there. They had a fight. She hit Savannah on the face with an iron. Savannah also ended up cutting her on her arm. Savannah wasn't arrested because she didn't have prior charges or any criminal background or history. Instead, she was given a PTI, a pretrial intervention program, because she was a first-time offender. This was to provide intervention and a second chance through rehabilitative services to prevent future criminal behavior. She went through that whole program and thought it was best to stay clear of any messy situation that could land her in a more serious situation. The books of Proverbs 11 verse 22 says, "As a jewel of gold in a swine's snout, so is a fair woman who is without discretion." It's just a beautiful face on an empty head. Basically, Anton was 25 at the time while Savannah was just 23. Both of them were closer in age, but Sabrina was 30, a mother of 4 and a stripper that works at Godiva's. Savannah had never heard about her and had never seen her. Despite the toxicity of her relationship with Anton, she still continued to see him. Even though he was a loser, lying, cheating with other women and had absolutely nothing to offer her, she was still with him. She worked with a debt collection agency and started dating other guys. Anton and Savannah saw each other from time to time and continued to be intimate even though they weren't in a relationship at this time in her life. She went to only 3 places: work, church, and her house. One day Savannah was at her cousin's house and Anton apparently used Sabrina's home phone and called her at her cousin's house. Sabrina called back and had a conversation with the cousin about her relationship with Anton. Her cousin told her the nature of the conversation with Sabrina. They met at a club where she was dancing and how long they had been dating. Savannah didn't care. She was just doing her own thing. She was seeing other people and just living her life. She was kind of glad because she didn't have to deal with him on that toxic type of level anymore. She was relieved Sabrina was now in her place taking all the heat from Anton's other women. The problem between Savannah and Sabrina started afterwards. She was used to dealing with Anton's other different women. Sabrina was no different from Anton's other women. There were lots of noise and angry complaining about her. She was sick of arguing and fighting. She also empathized with Sabrina because she had gone through the very same thing she was going through. She was much older than Savannah and Anton. She had worked 2 jobs to take care of her 4 kids. One job was at an automotive plant during the day and the other as an exotic dancer at night. Savannah's first encounter with Sabrina was at an African hair braiding shop. She went to get my braids styled and Sabrina was in the chair getting her braids styled so they couldn't do Savannah's hair, so she left. Savannah saw her and left. She recognized her because the club Sabrina worked at was managed by the guy she was dating. So he pointed her out to Savannah. He advised her to be careful because she went everywhere alone and Sabrina and her stripper friends had a reputation. Savannah recognized Sabrina when she saw her at the club but never had any interaction with her in the club. Anytime she went to the club, Anton would call and tell her he heard she was in the club with somebody. She felt since he always knew what she did at the club, Sabrina must be the one feeding him the information, so she assumed she knew her. Sabrina came out after her cursing and fussing, but Savannah laughed at her and drove off. But it got worse, because there were several incidents. That day at the African salon, after she left immediately, Sabrina came out of the shop yelling and screaming that she would beat her. Savannah laughed at her, pulled off her car and drove away. She wasn't going to argue with her. After that incident, she and her stripper friends harassed and threatened her for months. Imagine dating a guy who has someone like her lurking around. That was terrifying. They would go to her home, call her cell phone, call the house phone, and drive up and down her streets. She started parking her car in her backyard and dimmed the lights in the house to make the house look like she wasn't home. They would ring her doorbells continuously and she had her tires deflated. Every time Sabrina called or went to her house, Savannah called the police. One particular day someone was knocking at her door around 4:35 in the morning. Savannah looked out of her bedroom window and saw a white Lexus. The guy she dated had a hunter's green Lexus, but he seldom took different cars to her house, so she thought it was him and asked. Sabrina answered and she was completely taken aback. She asked the second time just to confirm she heard right. It was the same answer, so she proceeded to open the door. Sabrina was nice at the beginning and apologized profusely for coming to her house early in the morning. She stepped outside to talk to her on the porch and Sabrina explained to her that she had just driven from Florida from her daughter's basketball game and had spoken to Anton earlier. She had tried to call him back at some point during the night for some time, but he didn't answer. She wondered if he was with her. The problem with Sabrina was any time she couldn't reach him, she always thought he was with her even though Anton had so many other women. Savannah also put herself in a lot of awkward situations because even though she had another boyfriend, she was still intimate with Anton. Proverbs chapter 13 verse 20 says, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed." If Savannah knew what her association with Anton would cost her, she would never have any dealings with him. While they were on her porch, Sabrina told Savannah things Anton had said about her. Things like where she made her hair, where she bought her Gucci and Coach purses, and asked how she could afford such items. Unbeknownst to her, Savannah's purses were imitation products. Savannah told her she worked hard for her own money and had bonus checks, unlike her who was in the business of shaking her behind to get what she wanted. Sabrina completely flipped and totally became a different person. She tried to push her way into her house to see if Anton was inside, but Savannah blocked her. She asked her to leave. Push became shove and little scuffle at the door ensued. Savannah was able to get to her cordless phone and called the police on her. She left before the police arrived. Savannah explained to the cop what happened between both of them and the altercation. He asked if they were fighting over a man. Savannah explained to him that her complaint was about Sabrina coming into her home uninvited, like she paid the rent, and fighting and harassing her. Anyway, the police didn't help her at all in any way, shape, or form. He had his preconceived notion the problem was over a man and wasn't of much help. This happened several times to her. She would call the police and her assailants would be gone before they arrive. Another time again, Sabrina told Anton Savannah was seeing another guy. He went to her house, attacked and assaulted her. Her face was black and blue. Again, she called the police and pressed charges. They went to court. The case was thrown out and he was never arrested. Sabrina was at the court that day for some reason, but she wasn't supposed to be there. So Savannah took the opportunity to address all other issues she had with her. How she harassed her with her friends. The judge told her as long as Sabrina didn't trespass on her property, she could ride up and down her street as much as she wanted because she was a taxpayer. Savannah told the judge she didn't pay taxes but only shook her behind at clubs. The judge repeated that as long as she didn't go on her property, she could go anywhere she wanted, including driving up and down her street. Savannah got fed up because anytime she reported the case, she got the same response. No one gave an ear. At this point, all she wanted was for Anton to leave her alone. She stopped talking and taking his phone calls. She was done with him and ready to move on. Then on the 20th of July, 2002 Saturday, something tragic happened that changed the course of the lives of these two women entangled in a love triangle and their families for forever. Savannah had to work 4 hours out of town that day and had taken her son to her godmother's house. When she got out of work, she got a call from a local phone number, and when she answered the number, it was Anton. He said he was at school and was getting ready to leave. He wanted to take her out. She asked him how he was going to do that since he didn't have any money. He said Sabrina gave him some money and asked if she would go out with him. She said she was going out of town and hung up the phone. He called her several times after that, but she ignored his calls. So he decided to make an in-house call, and the company security guard informed her she had a visitor. Anton was at the lobby causing a scene. She didn't have a real connection with him, and the quality of his character was zero, because how would describe a man who takes money from his girlfriend who was obviously irritated you had a younger girlfriend and then spend the money on another woman? He asked if she would go with him, but she refused. He thought the guy was the man she was seen at the club with, but he was a totally different man. He pulled her by the arm, but she begged him not to make a scene at her job. When Anton wouldn't go, she assured him she would go out with him. He left and she went back upstairs to her office. Savannah had a weird feeling about the whole thing and tried to avoid him after she left work. By the time she got the key in her door, Anton was behind her. They had a heated argument. He raved, ranted, and fussed with her. He ripped her skirt off as they struggled in her sparsely furnished living room. While they were right there on the floor, her doorbell rang. She asked Anton not to answer it because she intuitively knew it was Sabrina. He answered the door anyway while she was grabbing some clothes to put on. Sabrina came and saw them but didn't understand that they were in a fight. She ordered her to leave her house, but instead, Sabrina cursed and threatened her. Anton went out of the living room and stood beside the car. Sabrina also stepped out on the porch while Anton was standing in the driveway near her white Lexus that he had driven to Savannah's house. Sabrina was on screaming and yelling and cursing both of them out, but Savannah was told her to leave. This was after Savannah had received a restraining order against her. She came at Savannah like she was going to rush back in again. She felt helpless but wanted to get Sabrina off her back once and for all. Because she just won't leave. Savannah was by now stressed mentally and emotionally. She ran to her kitchen and grabbed a big cup. She added a little bleach and some extremely hot water. Her aim was to throw it on Sabrina, but forgot that some weeks prior she had her garbage disposal blocked and she bought Red Devil Eye and a canister like Drano to unclog the garbage disposal. She poured the rest of it into that cup after she had finished cleaning and threw the container away. She planned to use it at a later date and left it there on the countertop with the rest of her cleaning supplies. So that day she grabbed this cup, added the hot water and bleach in it, and went to the door. Oh man, this was a crazy story. The anger that had built up in Sabrina because she had been cheated on over and over again. But the sheer rage from being blindsided, lied to, heartbroken, and even humiliated can take someone to a dark place. Savannah, on the other hand, had lost herself. All effort to get Sabrina off her back had proved abortive. Her anger raged and revenge became her only option. When someone asks you to leave their residence, why stay and continue to be heady and fight them in their own house? Just leave. Sabrina was still standing on the porch cursing Anton out. When Savannah opened the door, she threw the mixture right on her. Her scream was a long, loud, piercing cry, extreme of pain and agony. The way she screamed and yelled made Savannah realize she had messed up big time because it was an abnormal type of howling. She ran to the phone quickly and called the police and basically told them what she had done. When the liquid landed on Sabrina, the first thing she thought was, why would Savannah pour warm water on her? But a couple of seconds later she realized it wasn't warm water, because when she touched her face and her back, the skin was coming off in her hands. Her skin was literally falling off of her face, her neck, her chest, and her back. A white curtain came over her eyes and she knew she was going blind. Savannah went back to the door and saw how she was trying to find her way to her Honda car. Savannah cursed Anton out for not helping her get into the car fast enough. Neither Anton nor Savannah tried to help Sabrina at first. She was really scared to even leave her porch. Yes, the whole confrontation could have been avoided if Sabrina hadn't gone to her house uninvited looking for a man who was playing both of them. Anton finally helped her once she found her way to the car. He put her in on the other passenger side and drove off. Savannah thought she needed to do something to defend herself because the harassment was continuous. When she closed that door and went back into the house, in hindsight she could have called the police and maybe they could have diffused the situation at that time. But eventually Sabrina would visit her house again. It's difficult to see how this accident could have been avoided. If the police had taken her seriously and attended to her complaints, things would probably not escalate to this level. Savannah didn't know where they went. She found out later when the police got to her house. Apparently, Anton put her in her brand new Lexus that he had taken to Savannah's house and drove to a gas station. As they walked in there, the gas attendant screamed because there was blood everywhere. Then she locked the door and got Sabrina to a water fountain in the back of the shop. They splashed water on her because they didn't even know what to do to help her. She was bleeding and her face was turning black. Anton told the counter clerk to call 911 and left her alone at the scene. The shop called the police and reported the case. She was later taken to a burn center, where she was medically induced into a coma. She was in that state for a little over a month. She had lots of skin grafts. They took skin from her legs and arms to save my life. During the course of going back and forth and trying to regain my sight, she stayed in her room for 3.5 years and only went out for doctor's appointment. She had over 30 surgeries on each eye. Her eyes began to weaken, and the back of her eyes, the retina, started to detach. She became permanently blind. Where she lived was 4 houses from the highway. She tried to go into the middle of the road one night and end it all, but her son followed her and was able to hold her back from ending her own life. This could have been avoided, but because she was so angry and caught up in the heat of the moment, she made the wrong decision by going to Savannah's house and provoking her wrath. What she should have done was leave Anton alone. She lowered herself to his leave. At last he left her for dead and ran away in her car. Savannah was arrested hours later. After she was released, she stayed with her son's father for a little while and stayed in motels with her son at one point until she found another place. Her bosses knew what she endured in the hands of Sabrina and her friends because they also harassed her at work. They were very supportive, and she went back to work after she was granted bail. She worked up till the day she went to trial. She worked really hard and got an attorney. When he showed her Sabrina's pictures, she couldn't believe she did that to her. She didn't intend for that to happen, but the months of harassment and bullying got the better of her. What finally convicted her was Anton's statement. He told them she grabbed that cup and ran out into the yard and said, "This is for you," and threw it on her. But Savannah said she never stepped a foot on her yard or her porch. They fought at the threshold of her door. Anton was a dangerous, toxic, and self-absorbed man. His statement sent Savannah to jail on May 14, 2003, and robbed Caleb of his mother. In a recent interview, he admitted to lying in court because he was jealous and full of emotions. He had ample time to right the wrong done to her and try to get her sentence reduced or overturned by telling the truth about the actions of Sabrina and what took place that day. But he didn't. Savannah's actions, though severe, can be seen as a reaction to Sabrina's intimidation and aggressive behavior. The man she loved failed her in a profound way. Anton said Savannah didn't deserve the injustice and everything she went through. He decided to tell the truth out of genuine signs of love for her. He said she didn't deserve the time she got in prison. He said he didn't deserve her. She was probably one of the best girlfriends he ever had in my life. She made sure he had hot meals, clean clothes. She had to be at work at 8, but she would wake up at 5 to take care of him. She sacrificed her job to make sure he had a job, but he was still non-committal to her. She went over it and beyond for me. For him, she was just too good for him. There were situations where he would get angry with her and did a lot of stupid and selfish things to her. He never once stopped to consider her feelings and what he was doing to her. When the reality hit and he realized what he had done to her, she had always played a mother's role from a young age. He said Sabrina had anger issues and overly aggressive. He was angry at Savannah because he allowed my emotions to get the best of him. He was still in love with her but felt like she gave up on the relationship because of the guys she dated at the time. When he saw the same guy in court, he became jealous and lied against her, but when he wanted to tell the truth, it was too late. She was charged with assault with intent to kill because the concoction could have killed her. Sabrina. It wasn't just Savannah's son and family that were affected by the situation. Sabrina was affected, her 4 children were also affected. She also blamed the police for ignoring her complaints until she finally did something drastic. This story is crazy. As much as she called the police, they should have seen the history of her being stalked and harassed. At this point it was self-defense, but she lost the case. Savannah was sentenced to the maximum sentence of 20 years. She lost 20 years of her life behind this foolishness, only for neither one of them to end up with this man. Prison was very hard yet easy because she knew God and had a relationship with Him. It was easy. She read and studied a lot. She went to Bible classes and took advantage of everything she could. Savannah was released after serving 17.5 years. After she was released, she fell ill and had complete hysterectomy, and her thyroid was also removed due to cancer. Although she was free from incarceration, it was like being in confinement all over again because of her health challenges and her son, who obviously had no relationship with her. Philippians chapter 4 verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Whenever you think about your marriage, think about this verse. It will help you to treat your spouse and marriage better. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell, like, and leave your comments. Thank you for watching my video, beautiful people. Until next time, bye and God bless you.